Hey folks, David Stewart here. Let's talk about the coming crash in the ebook market for you authors and prospective authors. I think all the signs are there. I don't know exactly when the more significant parts of the contraction are going to take place. If you're wondering why would the ebook market contract, there's three big reasons that are going to run through all the things I'm going to talk about. First reason is market saturation. Second reason is Amazon hegemony. And the third reason, which is actually related to the second, is poor sorting and curation. So we've seen the ebook market go up and up and up and up and up and level off, and it's not really growing anymore. So that's sign number one. We have a market saturation in terms of the number of consumers willing to buy ebooks of a particular quantity, meaning the only way the market's going to grow more is if the same people buy more ebooks, like buy more ebooks on average, so they doubled their consumption per month or something, or you somehow get people reading English ebooks in some other country, which isn't really going to happen. So the market is saturated from the consumer perspective. At the same time, the market is oversaturated with producers. There's like more ebooks being produced now than ever before. There's more ebooks being produced this month than the month previous, So there's more and more ebooks being produced for the same number of people buying the same number of books, which means for authors, it's going to be harder and harder and harder to gain the attention of a readership, to have success on the Amazon platform, compared to when it was still growing, when it was still a growth sector. This has led a lot of authors to focus, say, on audiobooks, because they're like, audiobooks are still a growing sector of this, but I don't know exactly what's going to happen with audiobooks, whether that growth is going to slow down or how it's going to be related to the contraction that I see. So that's the first one, right? Now, that's not a shrinking, though. That's a shrinking per capita, meaning it's going to be harder and harder to make any money on Amazon for any author, and any author should have their eyes open about that reality. I'm actually talking about a shrinking of the market, and I think that's going to happen partly because of the Amazon hegemony, and specifically how sorting is done with the Amazon hegemony. So for me, most of my sales come through Amazon, and I don't mean 51%. I mean more like 95 to 99% of my sales are through Amazon. It's a near monopoly. There are alternatives, obviously, but almost everything goes through Amazon. Is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because anything that Amazon does, good or bad for the market, is going to affect the market immediately. If you had that kind of divided up amongst a bunch of different companies that were selling ebooks, what you would end up with is if one company did something poorly, then the others would gain some advantage from that. Whereas with Amazon, because it's already so total, if it goes down at all, if Amazon screws it up at all, it's going to bring down the whole house, meaning people are not going to immediately jump off the Amazon platform and go to, say, Kobo or something like that. They're just going to stop buying ebooks. And that leads me to the biggest problem that is facing a lot of indie authors is the poor sorting mechanisms of books. So the poor sorting mechanisms of books on Amazon has to do with categories. It has to do with what Amazon promotes to people, and it has to do with that, basically that whole system more or less becoming dysfunctional over the last year and becoming a pay to play, just free for all. It just doesn't really work anymore. So if you're a reader going onto Amazon, it's really hard to browse books and find ones that you want. A lot of books are miscategorized. They are in categories in which they do not belong. This is mostly an honor system thing that Amazon does, so you can email support and have them put your book in whatever categories you want. A really good example is actually superhero fiction. If you're to go look at it, you're going to see that the superhero books are almost impossible to find. Instead, you have like things like Harry Potter in, like, the top seller in urban fantasy is Harry Potter. That's not appropriate. That doesn't make sense. So if you are looking for something like a Harry Dresden book, something similar to it, you're going to see a bunch of books that aren't that have nothing to do with it. And if you were to buy one of those books thinking it was going to be like a Harry Dresden book, you would be very dissatisfied. And so the poor sorting ends up in a poor user experience. And that means that people may buy books that they think are deceptively advertised. Now, the reason authors put books in the wrong categories is to basically to get an orange tag that they don't really deserve. What you do is you get a book and you have it classified in a really low competition category. I've talked about this before, but you find a category that there's virtually nobody in it, and you put your book in that category, and boom, it's a #1 bestseller by selling 5 copies. And that's because there's no one else in that category selling books at all, meaning if you just sell a couple of books in the first few weeks, boom, you're a #1 bestseller. It's a manipulation of the system. The #1 bestseller orange tag becomes a type of social proof. So even if somebody sees, let's say your book is actually young adult fantasy, you put it in the superhero book section, you sell 10 books, you get that #1 bestseller badge. Somebody sees your book on the young adult fantasy side there, and they see that tag, #1 bestseller in superhero fiction. They don't really think that much about it. It's just they see, oh, that's a bestseller, and it has some reviews, and they go and they buy it. So the miscategorization really comes from authors. Now, expecting authors to play by the honor system, it's kind of like the tragedy of the commons. If you're not willing to basically break the rules, then you're going to get shut out of the game. The people who break the rules are always at an advantage when you are dealing with the honor system. So it's a really, really big problem. There's no one who consistently enforces these categorizations. And in fact, there's a lot of categories that don't even exist. Talk about, with where is it? Voices of the Void. It's a sci-fi horror book. Sci-fi horror is not actually an Amazon category, but superhero fiction is. This might be a very competitive category. People might really like horror with aliens and that kind of stuff. But it doesn't really exist on Amazon because of their categorization. So the more Amazon messes up its system, the worse it is for the entire environment. The worse it will get for each individual author because it's harder to manage it. What you used to do is you used to, drive up sales on your book, and then Amazon would promote your book. As long as you were selling books, it would keep recommending that book. Now it has a preference towards newer fiction, which means you have to be doing rapid release, shorter books, kind of shoveling stuff into the system, or you're not going to get that algorithm-based sales. You're not going to have Amazon promoting your book a whole lot. The other thing is it's become pay to play. You've had more and more, when you go to Amazon, you hit search results, more and more of the space on the screen is taken up by paid advertising, which means you got to shell out money in order to sell books. That's just the way that it is. Otherwise, your books are going to become invisible unless they're always a #1 bestseller in whatever keywords that person is putting in. Your book's going to get buried. It's going to disappear. So you have to use Amazon advertising to get those books in front of people. Likewise, there's huge numbers of keywords you can use in an AMS ad. You can use hundreds of keywords. That means that your book is going to show up in all kinds of different places and all kinds of different searches, meaning the advertised results, even though you're going pay to play, the advertised results, there's zero reliability as to whether that book is going to be what you actually want. All of this actually mirrors at least one significant economic event in the past, and that's the video game crash of the early 1980s. We can see a lot of the markers are the same. Although there was a hegemony at the time, which was mostly Atari. What we can see is that there was a saturation of the market in by both games and consumers, meaning no one else was buying more games, and so the market wasn't growing. People weren't just like growing out of control buying more games, but there was too many games in the market, and there was no curation of those games. There was no way for those games to be sorted into some kind of category which made sense for the people buying video games. There was no assurance of quality of the games, meaning if you were a consumer, you went down to the store and bought a new game for your Atari, it could be an awful game and not work, and there was no assurance that it was going to be fixed. So what actually fixed the video game crash? Well, what fixed it is after the video game crash, Nintendo solved the problem of curation by creating forced licensing agreements that they were going to, manufacture the cartridges, and they were going to make the cartridge, and you had to pay a licensing fee to them, and you saw that little Nintendo seal of quality. This ensured that they could control the library that was on the Nintendo Entertainment System. So if you went down and you bought a Nintendo game, you had a pretty good, there were still bad Nintendo games for sure, but you had a pretty good idea that it wasn't going to be a non-functional piece of shovelware, which is what you had for a lot of Atari games, including games like E.T., where they buried like 1 million of them in the desert or something like that. So we kind of can see the same thing with ebooks, is that once the system starts to break down and users are no longer able to buy ebooks that they think are good, what are they going to do? Are they going to go to Kobo? Chances are, because they have an Amazon device, they have their Kindle on their phone, they're going to probably just buy less ebooks, is what my guess is going to be. And that's really where my prediction comes down to, is that as a response to the broken market for consumers, they will just buy fewer ebooks. Instead, they will buy books through other channels or through other means. It could mean a return to the bookstore. So I don't want to paint too rosy a picture for Old Pub, but if people feel like they can't get a good book on Amazon and it's too hard to find a good book to read on Amazon, they're going to look elsewhere for books. They're going to go to the used bookstore, or they're going to go to like even Barnes & Noble. Now, the thing is, one of the reasons people are looking on Amazon is they couldn't find the fiction they wanted in the bookstore. The bookstore was promoting books that they didn't like, and Barnes & Noble is in trouble and has been in trouble, and physical bookstores have been in trouble for a long time, and a lot of that has to do with Old Pub, that is traditional publishers, putting out books that large parts of the consumer base are not interested in. And you can just look at the history of Amazon with categories like paranormal romance that just explode in the indie fiction market. Why are these so popular? Why aren't the big 5 publishers, formerly big 6, why aren't they putting out paranormal romance books? It's because they didn't want to. They didn't think of it. And they still don't want to. They tend to be very rigid with what they want to put out. They like having the control over what gets in and out of bookstores. So wherever you see those indie fiction explosions, Space Marine's another one, right? A lot of sci-fi stuff that men like to read. If you go to a Barnes & Noble, you're not going to see that many men. For whatever reason, it's become a very kind of female-dominated space. A lot of the books that are there are not, they're not organized to fulfill male readers' desires. They don't go into it to be like, oh, here's a new Space Marine book. Instead, they go and they get it on Amazon. So when they start to buy less books, everyone starts to buy less books, you're going to see a contraction of that ebook market, and things are going to start to go off in different directions. So the solution that existed for video games is probably going to be the solution that's going to exist for books, which is more curation. Publishers are a bit of a natural way that curate the books. You have things like Tor that obviously they decide who's going to be published and who's not. So if you are keeping up to date with Tor publishing, then you know what kind of books are going to come out. If Tor publishes it, you have a pretty good idea that it's going to be a fantasy book of some kind, and based on recent things, what the direction and the quality more or less is going to be. So I think we're actually going to need more curation in the form of publishers going forward in order for consumers to filter out some of the noise. They need better effective filters. Amazon used to have great effective filters. You get down to a specific category, it would recommend things that were related to you, due to their desire to collect money on both ends, which is they collect money from you, the consumer. If you're a writer, you're also a consumer because you probably buy books, but they collect money from the consumer by saying, buy an ebook and we get a cut. They also collect money from the author by saying, we won't show your ebook to anyone unless you pay us up front, give us money. So the authors are paying Amazon to advertise their books. Amazon's getting paid on both sides. They're collecting the money, and they're also going to be collecting money for the ebook sales. Now, Amazon has built itself on book sales, but I've also heard this argument. Amazon seems to not care very much about books anymore. It's making a lot of money selling other products. Books might be pretty far down the list these days, which means they're just not going to care that much about it contracting. And the last thing I want to talk about is Kindle Unlimited. A lot of authors have asked me, should I be in Kindle Unlimited? Should I not? I have a couple of books in Kindle Unlimited. I've gone back and forth on it. There's always something that's wrong with Kindle Unlimited. It's never worked correctly for authors from the get-go. Either there's people using it to like click farm up rankings in an inappropriate way, or they're not paying out money in the way that you expect. Amazon, of course, was putting money into the fund to make authors want to be able to be in that fund and get money so that they could shut out all competition. So by the time they've established the hegemony in like a subscription book market, there's really no competition for what they're doing. So whatever they do, if it goes up or down, it's pretty much on Amazon at this point. That's a big problem. It's a point of weakness for sure. That's something to be noted. But a lot of authors have noticed there's something wrong with Kindle Unlimited. Revenues are going down, like across the board. So if everybody's losing money in Kindle Unlimited, and generally I'm hesitant to do a lot of Kindle Unlimited stuff because if somebody reads the book on Kindle Unlimited, I get less money than if they bought it. So a read on KU is better than nothing, but it's worse than someone buying the book. So if somebody was going to buy the book anyway, it's better for them to buy the book than to offer it on Kindle Unlimited. That's kind of where we're at right now. But so many authors are so afraid to get out of Kindle Unlimited because they don't want to lose that sweet KU money. Even though it's going down and down and down, it's like, do I accept half of what I used to get or do I accept zero? Because I don't think I'll be able to make up the difference in sales. That's where we're at. So it's pretty bad for authors. And the thing is, it's going to get much worse for authors in the next year simply because this thing's going to accumulate. More and more books are going to keep coming into the market. How do you avoid this problem? You're going to have to think about robust solutions that are outside of Amazon, that don't depend on this old gaming of Amazon system where you would advertise up and sell some books and they would kind of keep recommending your book. What you have to do is you have to try to develop a readership and maintain contact with them outside of Amazon and keep them appraised with what's going on so that you can get them to come on to Amazon or wherever you want to sell your books and sell them. And of course, if you're doing that, then there's not a whole lot of reason to sell your books on Amazon in the future if people don't have a preference for it. If they have a preference for buying it anywhere that it's for sale, then you could sell it yourself. You could distribute the ebooks yourself using a variety of platforms or through a website. And you can even sell physical books. I think physical books are actually going to make a big comeback. Lots of authors don't even offer physical versions of their books because they're so focused on this ebook market. I offer physical versions of all my books. About 30 to 40% of my sales are physical books, which is much higher than most authors. But for whatever reason, my readers like to buy the physical books. They like them, and I like to make them. And personally, if it's available in physical now, I pretty much buy the physical because I want it to sit on my shelf and I want it to exist. I don't want it to go away and stop, just disappear off of my device. That might be another thing that's coming too, is like as books disappear off people's devices, they're like, I didn't really own this. I was just renting it. There's a transient feeling to an ebook that you don't get with a physical, real copy. So thanks so much for listening to this. Let me know your thoughts down below if you think that there will be an ebook contraction based on what you see in the market. Now, I think all the markets are there that we're really set up for a significant contraction, and now is just really the time to set up your provisions. Build a robust business that can withstand the contraction of the biggest hegemon really the earth has ever seen in terms of business, or to consider waiting to get into it, just trying to figure out a different way to operate your business. So thanks so much, and I'll see you guys next time.